I am Sherry Naudine. I am the owner of Collegiate Sports Advocate. We are almost 1,000 student athletes nationwide, and we have 479 committed thus far. We have really found our place where we belong, what we do, and we do like to bring as much information each Monday night at 8 p.m. Central out to you. And I want to draw you to our website, collegiatesportsadvocate.com. At the bottom, we have all of our media. We have an event, a media page, and then we have all of our links to our podcasts and our social media. And we would love it if you would connect with us there. And then we have a pin on our Twitter page that I'm trying to keep track of all of the committed players, since many of the publications charge you to get that information. And it's great information for us to know as we're working with our student athletes, trying to find the right fit for them. So again, I'm Sherry Naudine. If you aren't my friend yet, if you would throw me a like, I'm going to throw the mic over to our co-host, Dr. Jackie Wins.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for having me, Sherry, and being a co-host with you. I am Jackie. I hail from New Jersey. As you can tell, I'm a Sooner fan, but I'm an overall softball and female athletics fan. I'm a former D2 athlete in two sports. And I just invest in the women's game for everything possible here on Twitter. I do have a huge background in supporting and coaching women's soccer players as well. So overall, just here to help support the space, talk with our speakers, and overall contribute.
Thank you so much. And I am thrilled tonight to introduce our speaker, which most of you know. She is the queen of all queens out there, Karen Weekly, who is our head coach for University of Tennessee. And Karen, give us a little bit about your background, and then I'll form up how we got together here on this space tonight. If you just hit the little mute button on the bottom left, it'll unmute you.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Sherry. Can everybody hear me now?
All good.
Okay. Well, background, I'm not very technologically savvy, so that might tell you a little bit about how long I've been around. But like Jackie, I'm a two-sport athlete at the NAIA level. So just spent my whole life all about sports. And after college, playing basketball and softball in college, I went to law school, which was my dream since I was 10 years old to be a lawyer. And sitting in law school, kept thinking, I love this, but do I really see myself never on a court or a field ever again? Went about my business after I graduated, practicing law for a few years, but it's kind of a windy story, but fortunately found my way back to a softball field. And I've been coaching on a full-time basis for the last 22 years after spending 5 in private law practice and then 6 as a college professor teaching business law.
Fantastic. What a great background. And again, we're so excited to have you here. And I'm going to frame up how this conversation came about, because last week we had Coach Moore from Baylor University on, and we got a little off topic and we started talking about overuse. Some of the questions, and you're all welcome to ask questions on my Twitter or Jackie's Twitter, or most of you have my cell number. You can text us here and give us some questions to ask Coach Weekly if we don't get to them in the general conversation. We love the conversation, but we can't bring you off mic because of the compliance rules for NCAA Division I. So that's why we have you all on mute. So it came up last week. Coach Moore was saying, he's not so concerned about overuse, that it's just part of the, not part of the game, but they grow up and they get on with it. And then we started talking about the calendar. So then Karen and I were having a conversation Monday morning. I said, Karen, do you want to come on and talk about the softball calendar? Because I think sometimes it's a mystery. And as student athletes and us guiding student athletes through their journey, we run into having to kind of guide them through not only the NCAA restrictions and guidelines, but kind of the nuances of what happens when. And Coach Karen was putting out her camp information. And I was like, oh, I don't know how the kids are going to get to this particular one we were talking about. And she's like, what do you mean? And we started just having this back and forth. So Karen, I want to start off by just kind of framing up. There's over 1,600 softball programs, and you mentioned NAIA. There's Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, and junior college. and everybody wants to host a camp. So how in the world do all these student athletes get to a camp, and when do they get to it? And maybe I'll throw it back to you and maybe give some foundation of our NCAA recruiting guidelines for Division One.
Yeah, so there's a lot in there, Sherry. And it's not as specific as when do they go to camp, because if you start answering that question, then really you need to talk globally about the entire calendar, what young women are doing, the overuse, the injuries, why we're having them. I'm a big person on just always asking why. And then, eventually getting back to what are our values? What are our philosophies? I kind of like to look at things that way. I think for me, this topic became pretty relevant at camps when we talk to the parents, and we always have a Q&A session at our camps where the parents can ask any question they want, whether it is about recruiting or really just anything. But usually they want to talk about recruiting, and the questions would get to what's important to you. Do you want to see them at camp? Do you want to see them at tournaments? Do you want them playing in the fall? Do you want them playing in the summer? What do you guys want as coaches? And as these conversations would take place, I was starting to hear common messages from the parents. And one of those common messages was, please, is there any way we can not go to so many tournaments and not play so much? And I'm not going to say that was 100%, but I'm just saying it was overwhelming enough that I thought, okay, wow, there's a sentiment here, and we got to explore it a little further. I think for me, just kind of taking a step back, not from me being coach at Tennessee or being a college coach or what's going to serve my interests, just taking a step back, I kind of look at this like, in college, our young women come in and they play in the fall. And in the fall, we're working on building strength and building skill. So that's an entire segment where we're going to focus on how can we make our bodies better, and then how can we add something to our skill set. So for instance, if a pitcher, you want to work a new pitch, you're going to do it in the fall. You're not going to do it in the spring when you get in the middle of games. But we do have this entire segment, this window of opportunity to do that. And then spring is go time. We always say the hay's in the barn. We're not going to change anything now. We just want to take where we are and go be the best we can with what we have. And then summer is rest and recovery. They're taking at least a full month off before they ever start thinking about getting conditioned and starting back to the strength buildup. But it's really just kids ask me all the time, my current players, do you want me to play in the summer? I said, you do what you want to do. That's your time to just if you need a mental break, you need a physical break, whatever, and then we'll start ramping it back up in August when we return to campus. And I guess what I got to thinking is, we're doing this in college. We have this very nice calendar cadence to everything. But you look at our youth, there is no time in their schedule for a true rest period. There's no time in their schedule for a true, I'm just going to focus on strength, speed, skill development. There's always year round somewhere a pressure to play or a pressure to go to camps, to be at my best so I can go to camps. And I just keep thinking, as a coach, we've got to together somehow fix this. So there is a little bit of everything in their calendar year, but there's also a true rest period where nobody feels peer pressure to be in compete mode.
And that is exactly, Karen, where you and I picked off to say, we need to discuss this with all of you guys out there that have this experience and know what we do. So you just laid out how the college calendar lays out. And you and I were talking about, like, look, the travel ball softball players have 6 weekends in fall. And in our world in Texas, we had 3 of the 6.
Oh, I think she dropped out for a hot moment there.
Yeah,
I
got you.
Go ahead.
I heard we had 3 of the 6 weekends, and then it left.
I'm assuming she's in 3 of the 6 weekends to do certain things, and then they go automatically right back into camps or into some part of the season. But I had a question, and then we'll segue here and come back as she finds her service in the middle of. She's in like the middle of a highway. It's amazing what she does. But so when it comes to camps and with softball and things like that, when you invite all these students athletes there, and especially to those elite camps, what are you specifically looking for out of an athlete? Not just their ability clearly to hit, do the things that they need to do as a softball players, but what else are you looking for?
I think the reason it's good to get them to your camps is you want to be able to get in that teaching environment where you can understand, get to know, and feel. Hey, does this player connect? With the way I teach. Do I connect with them? Do they connect with me? You get a feel for the personality, and is it going to be a fit for how we do things in our program? A fit for how we seek to develop players. You're always looking to see how competitive kids are. And I think sometimes you don't get a feel for that in showcases because the scoreboard isn't even turned on. So you want to create environments where we're competing and there's winning and there's losing. And I can see how you go about that. And I can also see how you respond to failure. Even if we're working something one-on-one, how willing are you to just keep trying versus get frustrated and shut down? So I think there's a lot of those things because you can see talent pretty quickly, but I think the thing that really lets you know as a coach is this somebody who's going to fit here? Are all those other things beyond the talent level?
Absolutely, it's interesting to see from that point of view, and I often um, throw this question out to coaches in response to academics, and we talked
I,
about the fact that there's not a lot right to do.
yep,
Oh,
I'm
you're
back.
back.
I'm sorry. I'm sitting. I'm
There you
sitting in
go.
one spot. So can you tell me, Jackie, where you last heard me, so I don't repeat myself?
Karen, I believe she said 3 to 6 weeks. You had it.
In
Yeah, you
you
were
were
talking about 6 weekends in the
okay.
fall, and in Texas, something about three.
Yeah, so in then they normally get the December and a couple weeks off in January, but that's when they go to camps, and then they start high school from January until June. So then they've got 6 to 8 weeks in the summer, and then just the 6 weekends in fall. So it really becomes this crunch, and I was feeling the same that Karen was for the student athletes. Like, when do they ever get to rest? And then throw the multi-sport kids on top of it. They're playing basketball and volleyball and all these other things. So we wanted to put out to the audience and have this great conversation about how do we solve this? Is there a time and a place in which we can carve in these college camps? Because I'm with Karen, they gotta see the campus, they have to see the culture, the people. I mean, and Jackie, any thoughts on this?
I think it's overall, when you have such a busy schedule, and I think this is in each sport, which is why I think we see that dwindling in the aspect of a multi-sport athlete, which is a whole conversation for another day. But there's just there's just so much time in a day where you can have a student athlete and they have to be able to focus on both of those words, but also themselves. So it's interesting seeing this calendar and how it compares to others. But it's just every aspect of this is crucial, but when do they have time to do what they need to do and decompress? And I think that's where we see the mental side come in too.
Karen, what are your thoughts after you heard the student athlete schedule?
Well, I look at some of the other sports, and I have to admit I don't have people's calendars sitting right in front of me, but at least in college, um, football recruiting is, they attend some high school games in the fall, but it's primarily the summer, and all their camps are in the summer. They're not allowed to do camps any other time of the year. Same thing with basketball. I believe men's and women's basketball. They have a pretty, limited window in the summer where they are allowed to do camps. And I think what you see in softball is there really are very few restrictions on when anything is allowed. You can do camps anytime you're allowed to recruit, and we're pretty much allowed to recruit, throughout the year. I know in the fall we have those 6 weekends, but there's no restriction on anything other than the dead periods, which the dead periods that we have are few and far between. And I think that's in part what creates this. because there is no consistent time period where people are going to be shut down. And there was some talk at the past NFCA convention about tweaking the recruiting calendar again. And should we even, have fall recruiting? That was one of the things thrown out there. And I think a lot of people got up in arms about the notion of that because they thought that it was the college coaches saying, "Hey, we don't want to go out recruiting in the fall, but we want to bring them on campus for camps." Some may feel that way. I don't know. I can only speak personally. My feeling is, and again, you have to decide what are your values, what's your philosophy, what's the goal you're trying to achieve. If we're trying to achieve a significant period of time for these players to either shut down or play another sport, do normal high school things, then we have to work hand in hand on this. And shutting down recruiting would also mean shutting down camps. Now, I know the counter to that is, well, then you're going to shove everything into an even smaller window. True. Other sports do it and they make it work.
Well, and not to make this a pitch for my company, but this is one of the reasons why we've done what we've done for 9 years, is helping these parents navigate what's right for their student athlete, right? Like, not everybody can play at the elite Power 5 conference level. So we try to redirect them to kind of a multi-school camp environment where they can kind of start to understand where they fit. And then somebody texted me with, what about the cost of going to the camps? If you can't drive it, you've got to get them on a plane, and you've got to pay airfare, and you've got to pay hotels. What are some of your thoughts about that, Karen?
Oh, I think that's an issue with everything. It's not just camps. It's the same is true for everything these kids are doing, whether it's, paying for skill lessons, paying for tournaments with, pretty high cost entry fees, and, mandatory stay to play hotels and things like that. And that's what I hear at camps when we do these Q&As with parents, that they're just sort of searching for what's the right answer, because we are spending a lot of money and a lot of time, but we feel like we have to be there. If you're going to be there, if you, the college coach, is going to be there, then we have to be there. What do we do?
So what do you think about the multi-school camps when you can put multiple layers and NAIA and JUCO in on the same camp? Do you like those? Do you get enough time with the student athletes?
We actually have not done very many of those. We are going to this summer venture into that space for the first time. I'm anxious to see, how it all works. I think it's a pretty interesting concept. And, this comes from other sports. One of the people that is kind of organizing those kind of camps had a daughter who went through the lacrosse recruiting process. And he said they do it very different than we do. They run camps where it's, one big location, multiple schools are there, and kids can kind of go from field to field and pick and choose who they want to go to camp with. But it's all in the same venue and all in one day. So it's kind of a great way for the athlete and the parents to sort of shop in a much less expensive store, I guess, if you will. And I think it's an interesting concept, and I'm anxious to see how it works out.
Yeah, I love it. I'm a big fan. They've heard me say it before, of things like the Tulsa Elite and even the top club events, because they'll have multiple schools, multiple camps, and multiple days. I mean, Jeff Falali breaks it up with a D1 camp, so that you can throw your hat and your skill set into the D1 pool. And we usually advise the younger ones to see that and see if if they're in that pool area. And then the Division II, if you know what type of experience you want, and it's Division II, then you have that all in the same camp environment, all in the same plaza. And that's kind of my dream, Karen. I would like a plaza with a whole bunch of fields all in one arena. So Jackie, I see your hand.
Yeah, we have multi, school or coach camps in the Northeast here, because of the fact that there's only so many months you can have them outside, and otherwise you hit the cold weather months. and everybody's, inside or doing something individual, or, they're on their own. And I see them and they are highly successful. And it's interesting to see the dynamic when I do have recruits come back from various different supports and sports, and they're talking to me. They do express that they like that better because they have the ability to not just see one coach and interact with the coach, but they can see also the differences of the coaches right there, as opposed to having one weekend and then the next weekend. They can see that interaction, and overall demeanor, and have that, one-on-one, but not necessarily as intimate as if you were on campus. But then that allows them also sometimes to pick which ones they want to go to. If they have two coaches there that they really enjoyed or they worked with, and so on, they can then choose to go to those campuses. It can save money on that end as well. So it is quite an interesting thing.
Sharon,
I
any
think
comments there? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it could be kind of an entry level, like an entry into the camp arena. I think the one downside of that kind of a structure, I know for a college coach, is you want to get people on your campus so they can get a feel for your campus. Because, I mean, let's be honest, everybody can say, oh, camps are, for, the skills and blah, blah, blah. Camps are recruiting. There's no question about that. It doesn't matter what kind of camp we're having or what ages. When people come to our campus for a camp, there's, not, and I don't mean recruiting in terms of being illegal. I just mean when you get people in your home, in your environment, they're going to get an idea for what that feels like. So if we're doing this at a place where there's multiple fields and multiple schools, they're going to get a feel for the coaches, and that's it. They're not going to get a feel for the campus, the community. Is this a place that feels good? And the other part of that is most of us have current student athletes working our camps. And to me, they are the absolute best spokespeople for what it's like to be a student athlete there, what it's like to, be a part of this program, what the values of the program are, what the academic, focus is, all those different things. You miss that when you're not on your campus, but I kind of like these other camps as well, because I think, each is going to serve different people differently. And, if you really like what you see out of a coach, then you can take that next step to going to their campuses. So I don't think we can just try to replace on campus camps.
100%. And I know you and I talked about this, like, Karen asked me, like, how did it work last year for you, Sherry? And I was like, August, there was a couple weekends in August where some colleges went head to head for that class of 24 so that they would get their elite kids that they've been watching and maybe have had to a camp already, but they've had some sense that this is a kid that they want to learn more about. And they're hoping that that kid will come to campus and kind of to throw the nod to them too. But one of the other questions was, how do you know when it's an elite camp? You see so many emails, and Karen, I'm going to tell you, we see 1,650 schools. I bet you 1,000 of them send an email that says, oh, dear Susie Smith, you're invited to an elite recruiting camp, and yet they might be a 23 or 24 and they're not even recruiting that class anymore. Any thoughts to that?
Well, I think that's where, you guys as the travel ball coaches are so valuable to these young women and their parents, and just in terms of filtering through a lot of that. And, that's all about relationships. If you, if you're, kind of leading somebody on in a sense, if I did that to you, Sherry, one of your players, it wouldn't be too long before you'd say, yeah, I don't know if you want to go there because they keep saying this, but it's not really what's happening. And the truth about that is, if you're going to kind of be misleading in one setting, then what are you going to be like when that kid's there on your campus? So I think that's where you guys are so valuable in filtering through that, and, making sure and making those phone calls to coaches and saying, hey, what's the deal here? What's the truth? Because if this isn't really what, it seems to be, she's wasting her time. And, I've had those conversations many times with travel ball coaches, and I'm always going to be upfront and tell them, yeah, we're done for that class, or, right now we don't have a need, or whatever it might be. Because the last thing I want is young women and their families wasting money and wasting time.
Well, and I know I had this situation this summer where I had a very top end, talented young lady, and she had 3 invites for the same weekend. And I said, "Who came to see you play? Who's shown interest in you? Who's got the most, invested in you?" And literally, that made the decision for her. And so that's kind of goes back to, can you see the top level ones play, and evaluating them in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. That's a lot of time to evaluate talent. And the you mentioned the travel ball layer, and understanding the trust and the relationship. We had that call last year with Kama and Coach Kenny about the relationships that help bubble up the right kids to the right layer. So that happened, and honestly, I told her, then you go to that one. Well, where'd she commit? She committed to that one. So, some of the coaches have to be honest, and you can't shoot an entire database out and call it an elite camp. And then, oh, wait, I'm not recruiting 24s anymore. That's where some of these 24s are coming into the summer, and they're just getting. I knew when Triple Crown opened their camps because they got absolutely annihilated, bombarded with every registration. And I love Triple Crown in their camps, but literally every student athlete. And so, they ask, are they still recruiting 24s? And then I trust those relationships, like with you, to say, hey, are you still working on that class? And if so, what position? And here's some film, and here's the link to their page. And that then those relationships start to happen. And I'm with you. I think they have to go to camp. They have to see the culture. They have to see the environment that you're offering, because it's not for everybody. And then there's no shocker when they get there. Jackie, any thoughts?
I think it's interesting when you do have a coach who does that, but I sort of think, as Coach Weekly mentioned, I think that is when you start to question the integrity, right? Especially if you go to that camp and you get burned and you see that there's a ton of athletes there that potentially have no shot. And you don't even get a chance to talk to the coach. And it's just sort of that experience. I think that eventually gets a bad taste in your mouth and word spreads, right? So I don't think that's advantageous on either part. But I do think that it's important to really, talk with your travel ball coach, whether it be your travel ball coach or someone like, Sherry with CSA. Really be able to have a communication line, especially if you're getting a lot of these elite offers to go to these camps. Then really establish that, because you don't want to be spending a ton of money. In soccer, you see it often. It's like, I'm going to 20 camps, one each weekend at a different university, and there you've spent X amount of dollars. You want to know who's really actually interested in you, and to take that leap of faith, right? And to really invest in a school and what they have to offer on campus, and through their program, interacting with the athletes. It's a whole process. You don't want to just spend the money, go and feel like you've been cheated in a way.
Talking there about it's a process, it takes time. It takes time. And that's one of the challenges right now. I like the fact that we're not recruiting till September 1st of the junior year, because I think committing 7th and 8th graders was just not healthy. But I think one of the, I guess, unintended consequences of our rule change is everybody's rushing out the gate on September 1st thinking they have to hurry and make a decision. And you see that a lot. You feel that a lot from the kids and the parents. And I think you nailed it by saying this takes time. It takes time to, develop that relationship and decide, is this really somewhere that not only I'm going to call home for 4 years, this is going to be my alma mater. And these are the people that I'm going to meet some of my lifelong best friends here. And I'm going to create relationships with these coaches that are going to last, 40 years, not just 4 years. And there's such a rush to this whole process to, getting on campus, getting to camps, getting the recruiting process done, wrap it up in a little bow, boom, I'm committed, we're good. And, I wish there was a way we could just sort of slow it down and everybody not feel like they have to race to the finish line.
Well, I have an idea, and you know me, I love ideas instead of complaints. I like volleyball's schedule. They open it up middle of June, and that would open up another summer, their sophomore year, to just take that pressure off, that angst off, to get more evaluation time. As a coach, you want to get to know their families, their social media. There's just so much more, and they're maturing and growing, like you said. You're not. Gonna. 'Cause. 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 '
I think she went out again.
I think she did. I feel like I'm finishing someone's sentences.
And it's always when she's most passionate.
Yeah.
I'm
To that
cracking up.
middle of June, what I was going to ask her is if she knows, do they open it up for contact, emails, texts, phone calls, etc., but no visits until the fall? Because I think that's something that we have thrown around. It didn't get put in that way when it first was introduced, because I think we knew that if we didn't do something that was in line with what was already happening, we probably weren't even going to get the rule changed at all. And lacrosse and somebody else was using September 1. But I think there's a lot of us now that we've been through that for a few years that wouldn't mind seeing a window of opportunity starting at some point in the summer where you could begin those phone conversations, the texts, the things like that, and then a later date for visits and offers to begin.
I love it. And
So
I'm back on,
there you
Jackie. Sorry. What happens is somebody calls in and it takes my voice off until that call completely goes away, even though I threw it to voicemail. So I apologize. I could have sent it to snooze a long time ago, but I didn't want to lose connection with you guys texting in between here. So I apologize. But I love that answer, Karen, and I like it. And that was just something I like, a solution instead of complaints or issues there. And that way you get more time to evaluate the student athletes in a non-pressure environment. And I will share, because you've lived this worse than I do, the pressure on the student athletes come September 1st is so intense. I can't even describe to those of you who haven't been there yet. That September 1st window is incredible. And we do a decision grid, and you don't always end up going where you thought you were going to go and where you were really targeting and where you invested all your camps, and all of a sudden somebody really likes you. Well, you need time to build that relationship and go on campus and visit their camps and see an unofficial visit and do an evaluation. But the pressure, I mean, within a week we had coaches saying, well, if they don't say yes, we're moving on. And I was like, what in the world? Go ahead, Jackie.
I just want the question was asked by Coach. What occurs on June or in June? What the contact is? So that's verbal scholarship offers June 15th for volleyball.
Yes.
And private correspondence.
Yes, 100%. And I like it. And they didn't come as hard. And I had some SEC level volleyball girls. They didn't come as hard, and yet they made an offer and rescinded it because she wanted some time to review until softball came. She was a dual sport athlete, so that was difficult for the family too, because I think we have to give them some time to review those options, especially when there's two different calendars, and that's unique. We rarely get a kid at that layer that can play both at that layer. So hopefully that answered it.
So the only thing I don't like about the verbal offer being okay when that date rolls around, if you were to do an earlier, communication period, is you're going to get coaches who say, here's the offer, and it's only good for blank. And they'll give you a deadline that's prior to the time you could even go on that campus for an official visit. And
yeah,
to
I'm
me,
with
that
you. So how
that
about
kind of
no
no
verbal?
offer.
How about just
Yeah.
hey, you can come on campus and we can talk to you and cut the counting how many times we talk to each other, but really give us a chance to get to know each other without the offer, and keep the September 1st offer.
Yeah, that's what I'm in favor of, because to your point, Sherry, about coaches saying, well, if she doesn't make a decision, I'm moving on. Uh, every camp we host, I tell the kids the same thing. If you get pressured like that, I always liken it to going and buying, a car, some big item. As soon as I'm told, hey, if you leave this lot, the deal's gone, I don't ever want to go back to that lot again, because I want to deal with people who have integrity, and I feel like they respect my decision making process, and I don't want to do anything under pressure. And one time I thought, when Ralph said, will you marry me, and hey, you've got a day to decide, I mean, I was like, would I want to start a relationship like that? I mean, to me, that's just like such a weird place to think this is somebody and something you want to have a relationship with when you are getting a deadline. That to me, if I'm that kid or that parent, I'd just walk away and never look back.
Yeah, and I agree. Again, the decision grid we use, giving them that interaction, but they still need that time to go on campus and get that unofficial visit and understand what it looks like and what the feelings are going to be. So, if they can't even give them the fall, that's a struggle for me. But I'll flip it around because then I support some coaches where they say, well, if I don't get this kid, then I can't go after that kid because she's going to commit somewhere else because I haven't come for her yet because I want this one to be my number one. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no easy answers. I think it's the honesty and integrity is the only way. And as a coach sitting in my shoes, you can say, "Hey, I'm not putting a deadline on anything, but I need to keep recruiting, because this is a position that I need to fill. But I'm not going to put any pressure on you, and I'm not going to give you any deadlines other than I'm going to need to keep recruiting."
Yeah. And I've told the families that same thing that, hey, you have to know when you like it or you don't, or what is it that you're waiting for. I'm an old salesperson, 28 years in sales and marketing, and there's a process, and you have to uncover the objections and what is it that's not making you like this 100%. Let's investigate that. So asking the questions and having that relationship and spending more time with you, I think, is what's important. So, any other thoughts, or do you want me to read you a couple more questions?
I'm ready for more questions.
Okay, so another one. This might throw you off topic, but when it comes to recruiting transfer portal players. What do you think, if any, needs need to change and why? I mean, if that's too big of a topic to cover on this because it's camping, then feel free to pass.
No, I think what people don't really understand is the transfer portal in a sense has always been here because there are only a few sports that used to require an automatic sit out, and that was football, men's and women's basketball, and baseball. There was no possibility of an exception. Every other sport, as long as I've been coaching, the rule was you can't play immediately unless you're given a waiver by the school you left. Well, everybody gave the waiver. So nothing's really changed there other than we have a portal where people put their name into, rather than telling your school, hey, I want to contact this number of schools. What I have an issue with when it comes to the portal and recruiting is tampering. The portal in and of itself doesn't bother me at all. It's a pretty useful tool. But what bothers me and what bothers every coach in college sports is tampering and the notion that people are kind of doing an end around to reach out to players at schools before they ever go in the portal. They may not have even been thinking about going in the portal. And now utilizing current players or travel ball coaches or somebody else to reach out and say, hey, I know that, if you had an interest, there's money here. And we all know that goes on. And again, I know you said, problems without solutions. I'm not sure what the solution is because it's a very difficult charge to prove. But I think if we could crack down on tampering, we might see some change.
You know me, I always have ideas, Karen.
Yeah.
So this goes back to relationship. I wouldn't deal with a coach or an advocate who was caught tampering because it's really easy to find out. We all know each other, right? And everybody knows everybody. And you all know who those people are that do the tampering because they're repeat tamperers, right? Uh,
Yep.
that to me is the integrity of the people that you're building relationships with, and you have to be honest and direct into their faces to say, hey, how did this happen? How did this kid get away? And what's going on here, and then be firm about, hey, then I guess we won't be doing business. Because we've had that on the flip side. We've had college coaches say to a kid, oh, go ahead and quit your travel team for your senior year. They want to save money. They don't want to go to the big tournaments because they're committed already. And we're like, what? We almost had an 18 and under team last year that had all committed Division One except for one. And their coaches are saying, oh, it's overuse. It's going to be too much. You don't need to finish those last tournaments. And those are qualifications. Those are nationals. And then half of the team wouldn't have been able to play, and they were the next year's recruits. So, I'm like, you don't want to be doing that because we will not be back. We will advise our student athletes to go someplace else if that's what you're advising, because I don't think they understand the effects. Well, they said, well, it's just one kid. I said, yeah, but that one kid became 2 kids and 3 kids and 4 kids. And now we have a whole team this year not even planning on going to nationals because of that. And that's all being pushed back by overuse and those particular college coaches. So that's my solution. What do you think?
Well, I think you're right that, maybe there's not like a legal rule that's gonna, help us. But like you said, you learn pretty quickly who those people are that are gonna engage in tampering, and word gets around. And, I think for all of us, your integrity, if you don't have integrity and people don't believe you have a reputation for integrity, whether you're ever caught or not, it's already burning you because, people just aren't going to trust you. Travel ball coaches aren't going to trust you. And I appreciate what you just said because, you know, just because a kid commits to Tennessee doesn't mean now she's mine and I can tell her what to do. Um, Ralph made a point of this way back in the beginning. He was very clear. We are never going to interfere with the travel ball decision, who they play for, when they play, that kind of thing. That is a family decision because as soon as we start doing that, we're going to tick people off. And why, it just doesn't even make sense. Plus, they're not playing for me yet. They're playing for me the day they enroll as a freshman at Tennessee. And it's really not my place to, influence those kind of decisions. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Jackie, do we have any other questions?
We do have some questions on the space. So let's see. Okay, so we do have one from Evan, and Evan is a loyal listener and always into every sport on Twitter, avid fan here. And he says, in 2013, when you guys went to the Women's College World Series, which player had the best game of their life? And throughout the years, what's been the biggest turnaround from the years of greatness?
So 2013, man, it'd be hard to say which player had the best game or the game of their life. I think, on a stage like that, your pitchers are always going to be in the spotlight. And I'll never forget Ellen Renfro just throwing an absolute gem of a game in the first game of the championship series against Oklahoma, game that went 11 innings, I think it was. And she was just lights out. And, just really, it was kind of the culmination of somebody just, really trusting herself, trusting her pitches, trusting her teammates, trusting her coaches, and just leaving it all on the field. And I remember, as heartbreaking as it was to lose that year, just feeling like, as a coach, you always say, if we leave it all on the field, I'm going to walk away, content. And I didn't say happy, but we walked away from that World Series just feeling like every player had left it all on the field and done everything they absolutely could do. And then the second part of the question I have forgotten. I'm sorry.
What do you think? Let me just head back to it all right. So it says, what do you think throughout the years? What's been the biggest turnaround from the years of greatness? So how has the game changed?
Oh, for Tennessee or the game?
We'll stick with the game.
Okay. I would say, the game is so different now in terms of pitching and just how many pitchers are needed in order to have success. You go back to, our first years here at Tennessee, you got Monica Abbott. And I look now at the number of appearances she made in a year and the number of victories. I think she won, 40 some games in a year. And players were just in general so much more durable. And pitchers could throw, so many back-to-back days. And it's not that way anymore. I'm not sure what the reason is, if it's lack of being multi-sport athletes or playing too much, or I think part of it might be playing showcase softball, where, okay, you get the first 2 innings, you get the next 2 innings, you get 2 innings. Nobody's training their bodies or their minds to throw 7 innings and then to do it, again the next day or again the next day. Nobody's doing that. So that's one of the biggest changes I see. Of course, technology is really kind of taken over, and there's so much analytical information available. I think the challenge there is, we're always going to be a world with a ton of information, but it's interpreting that, figuring out what's really useful, what's not, and then giving it to our players in a way that they can understand.
Fantastic. And I know on our pitching session, we talked about the number of pitching that's changed, and that, you don't see a kid carry a 7 inning game anymore either. And that, comes back to, having to showcase and feeling the need to have to be out there and give everybody a chance that they rarely get a chance to go, all nine. And that brought up the next question that a listener just asked, which is your opinion on rotation of travel teams, 2 to 3 year commitment to a program being less of a thing now and trickling down to the transfer portal. So I guess the movement on travel ball, are you equating that to the possibilities that they'd be moving in the portal when they get there?
Oh, I would definitely say it's something that as a college coach, you're going to notice and you're going to ask questions. I always want to know why, how was the move made in terms of, okay, tell me about the conversation between the athlete and the coach. What were the reasons? Was it done in an appropriate, above board, honest way? Because my feeling is there's a lot of people in this world that think the grass is greener, and as soon as something isn't really going well, they're going to be vulnerable to somebody coming in and saying, "Oh, well, hey, come on over here. It's great over here." There's no there's no company you're ever going to work for. There's no program you're ever going to play for. There's no church you're ever going to belong to where everything is perfect. And one of the things that makes an environment healthy, and the kind of environment you'd want to be a part of, is, hey, we have problems. Everybody has problems. Every family has problems. How do you deal with those? Do you deal with them in an upfront, healthy way? Do you have the hard conversations? Do you still love and support each other through the struggles? But if you're just trying to avoid struggle, you're going to have a tough life jumping from one thing to another and never finding what you're looking for.
Another fan question came in, and it is, what impact, if any, has Athletes Unlimited or NPF had on the collegiate level?
Well, I've got a player in Athletes Unlimited right now, Aubrey Leach, and I think what's so cool to watch with her is just the passion she has for AU and for bringing softball to the world. And college is great, but these young ladies still want to play, and they have a skill set that, for a lot of them, they won't reach their peak till long after college, and they need an environment in order to continue to pursue that. I go back to like Monica Abbott. Monica Abbott is so much better now as a pitcher than she was when she was 22 years old and left the University of Tennessee, because she kept playing and she kept learning and she kept growing and she kept reinventing herself and finding ways to improve. You look at men in professional sports, Michael Jordan was a lot different at 30 than he was at 22. Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. I mean, you could go from sport to sport. And just giving these young women a place to play where we can pay them what they deserve so that they can develop their talents to the fullest. And then we get to sit back and experience the joy of watching somebody do something at such a high level.
I love that. And Jackie, if you wouldn't mind checking to make sure we've asked all the questions while I do a little wrap up here, but we've got a really nice audience on here tonight. And I'm sure it's because, Karen, you're so amazing. But if you could all remember to like us and show us some love here. And remember that we come back every Monday, 8 p.m. Central Time. And we're always looking for the next topic. And I have a dicey one I want to throw out there. And Karen, maybe you can help me figure out how to put it together, since we're such good brainstormers together. Is some of the behavior, either from the fans or the flipping off that happened in one of the the college teams, and then last night there was some hand signals going on against the players, and there just seems to be a lot of energy about that. Do you think that's a topic we should cover up here? And if so, are there good speakers you would recommend? And we might take that offline.
Well, I absolutely think that's a topic that needs to be covered. And, I think there's a lot of conversation about female athletes being able to express themselves, express their enthusiasm, their passion for the games they play, just like the men do. And I agree with that 100%. But I still think there is a sportsmanship line where you shouldn't be directing things personally at another athlete, taunting, demeaning, anything like that. I just think that just crosses a line. But that I think that's what I struggle with. It seems like in society now we don't have the respect for those lines and those boundaries that we used to. I believe in freedom of expression, but I also think one of the big problems we're having in our country and the world is just a lack of civility towards our fellow human being.
Yes, you said it well. And so maybe I'll call you later this week and see if you have any ideas of who might be good speakers or topics, or if you want to join us again. And Jackie, have you checked out to see if I missed anybody on our questions? I never like our questions to go unanswered. And if not, we'll answer them offline. But Karen, I want to thank you a million times over and just appreciate your time and that you give to us. I mean, this is Jackie's got a hand up, maybe a question.
Yes, we do. All right. So the first one is, and I'll sort of tie these two together. It's why did you choose the University of Tennessee to coach at, and what makes it so special? And then the last one, which I'll just keep for you at the end, but I'll pose it, is what's the most NIL money that you've heard of within the softball world? Like, what is, what are we seeing?
Yeah. Okay. So why did we choose Tennessee? So that's a really good question because Ralph and I were down at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. Ralph was the head softball coach, and I was a professor, full-time professor teaching business law, and we absolutely loved it. We loved we lived on a golf course. I played 9 holes of golf pretty much every Monday morning. We had wonderful friends. It's a wonderful place to live. We were very, very content. And when Tennessee called, honestly, we thought, nah, we'll talk to them, but no, we really like it here. We like our life. Things are good. We came up to Tennessee and we met Joan Cronin, the women's athletic director at the time, Pat Summitt, the legendary greatest coach, and other people at Tennessee. And what blew us away, and you could just feel it, the first hour, 2 hours we're on campus, is how much the University of Tennessee valued women. And it wasn't because of Title IX. It wasn't because they had to. It was because the presidents at this university from 40, 50 years ago simply believed that women should be treated as well as men, and women should be given the opportunities that men do. And I just thought, man, I don't know that there's a place like this, because I had friends in the coaching business, and you just heard a lot about struggling for this, that, and the other, not feeling respected. And I thought if I could coach at a place where they believed in women, not because they had to, but because they thought it was the right thing to do, and they'd been doing this long before it was popular, um, I just felt like that's a dream come true for somebody who was a female athlete who grew up, not having what the guys had and being ticked off about it my whole life. And Tennessee just really is a very special place that believes in women, and so that's why we came here. That's what makes it what it is, and that's why this is the only place I ever want to coach. I can tell you what I've heard about NIL, but it would only be rumors. So I don't honestly know. I think some of our athletes in the first year of NIL, so I don't know about this year yet because we haven't come to the end of the year. But I think some of our athletes in the softball program in the first year of NIL probably took in somewhere between 20 and 25 grand. But I've heard of some much higher numbers thrown around this summer during the whole transfer portal and kids looking at different schools and NIL being a factor in that. That again, it would all be rumors, but there were definitely a lot higher than that.
Wow, what a night. We started off with the softball calendar, and I think we touched a few topics we hadn't even brought up before. And I think that's how we keep on evolving into the next week. So, Karen, we want to thank you again. You're fabulous. I love your honesty and your insight and your passion and caring for the female athletes and just sport in general. So I think that's fantastic. And thank our listeners, our loyal listeners, and our new listeners. Come back again and share our space and keep inviting. This is how we grow the game, and we just appreciate everybody. Jackie, any final thoughts?
just overall, coach, I love the words of wisdom that you provide, especially at the end. I think that all of these athletes in here need to hear this, need to know what's occurring, and also your thoughts on not many coaches have come on or contributors that really talks about the future and how the game can be changed. So I love the fact that you're forward thinking in that manner. And just how you coach and how you present yourself and your team and your university is honorable. So thank you for coming on, not just for me, but for the athletes in the room.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you inviting me. It's an honor to be with you and to be with all the listeners. And we're all in the business of raising up young women to be strong, independent leaders and people of character in their communities and do great things in this world. So we're all in this together.
Thank you. What a great way to end our space here tonight, everybody. Thank you again, and we'll see you next Monday, 8 p.m. Central Time. Have a good night, everybody.